All right, here we are. I'm joined here by Ascend, and we're going to be doing some compassionate epistemology, talking about whatever Ascend wants to talk about. I hear that might be Western and Eastern Enlightenment without traditional faiths. But Ascend, yeah. You had messaged me and you asked me to have a conversation. Uh,
Mhm.
what was up with that?
What what was up with that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's a conversation that I I'm very interested in having in the community that I swim, atheist community, where um I hear, sometimes the need for a ethical system, a sometimes a religious system, um, because there's been critiques about secular humanism that has been seen as not giving that spiritual meal that other faiths have. And I am like, well, wow, what about Buddhism, which predates Christianity 2,500 years. So it's interesting to me that there isn't more, or maybe I haven't heard more of an exploration in the atheist community about Buddhism, since it is especially early Buddhism. Let me be very clear. The early Buddhist texts, you know, don't have a God central figure. The original, I will say, the original Theravadan um, uh, teachings don't have, and don't see Gautama as a god. So he's just a guy who had a really great idea about alleviating suffering. So
Okay.
yeah. So I was like, well, the last podcast or the last stage, I think I heard there's some things I heard you talk about religion with people, and I thought this would be a great kind of exploration in a different way to talk about religion.
Yeah, sounds good. So tell me a little bit about what you mean by all this, like Western and Eastern Enlightenment without traditional faiths. I know you kind of touched on it just now, but
Yeah.
what do you mean by all these terms? What's going on
hmm
here?
Yeah, if I were to let me and I've thought about this for a while. Um Western enlightenment I would phrase as critical inquiry, critical thinking, um critical philosophy. The foundation, critical thinking, critical inquiry is the foundation of I would say Western enlightenment, especially its move from away from religious superstition, of really getting to the empirical rational exploration of reality rather than saying, oh, a god did it or it's demons doing it. No, let's see what the natural world teaches us. And so critical inquiry is about, what is really the case, as it's exploring that. And then there's this other aspect, which is I call mind inquiry, or to afraid to even drill down a little further, Buddhist inquiry, which is which talks about how can I respond well to what is really the case. And that I think you can really uh, bring into a nugget what what mind inquiry or dharma inquiry. I like using mind inquiry to open it up. The dharma inquiry sounds so esoteric when it's not meant to be that way. It's just about the mind and how it operates and how it navigates with reality. So, to bring it together, what is really the case, critical inquiry, and then exploring what's really the case. How do I respond well to what is really the case, which is mind inquiry? So together,
Hmm.
that is what I call the Western Eastern Enlightenment, and it's much of an advancement of the age of enlightenment where we are now, which in the age of reason, which has given us a lot of wonderful things. But now there needs to be a internal exploration about how can we advance both externally as well as internally, which is what
Okay.
I'm kind of like bringing to the table.
Gotcha. Okay, I think what you're saying is Western Enlightenment is critical thinking. It's
Hmm.
everything reality that is external to yourself. That sound about
Yeah.
right? Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. You can say that. Yeah.
And the natural world of reality external to yourself. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and then Eastern Enlightenment, that I might be a little bit fuzzy on, so you might have to help me out here. So you said it's how I respond to what is the case, and you said mind inquiry, and it sounds like it's something internal. So in your head, is that kind of what you're saying? Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yes. And the foundation I pull from is Buddhism, which is, just seeing how life operates, how, for example, because it's not just about what's in your head, it's about also how reality works or operates
Okay.
at a daily level. Like, some things that you want, there's a tendency for you not to get them sometimes. Loved ones that you want to be with you, they may get sick and die. Um, so there is these, things that you desire, you know, there's a tendency of not having a lasting fulfillment uh by having them in your life all the time. That cheesecake, your weight size, everything seems to be unpredictable, fluxing, changing, and how to be okay and comfortable and navigate that well is this aspect of mind inquiry.
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. So I use a little bit different words to describe that phenomenon.
Hmm.
I would say that it might be like this figuring out the strategy that you use to navigate through your life, how you make decisions, kind of that kind of thing. Is that kind of what? Are we on the same page?
Yeah, that's gets close. Yeah, that's not
It's
bad.
close.
Not
Okay. Okay.
bad.
All right. Close enough to continue.
Close enough to continue.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. And so we're from what it sounds like, we got both these things, kind of combining them without traditional faiths, and I'm assuming that means traditional like religions or some sort of religions,
Yes.
supernatural
Hmm.
beliefs. Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, and
And may I clarify a little bit? I don't want to.
yeah,
This is not a smooshing of those. Actually, the quality, or should I say their benefit, is in how they have different areas of inquiry, but how they can relate reciprocally with each other, have a mutual benefit by being in the same orbit, and how they can feed off each other in navigating reality well, I think it's what I'm kind of intrigued by.
okay. So one thing you might be using for this particular purpose, like
Hmm.
Western Enlightenment, you might be using for this particular area. Eastern
Hmm.
Enlightenment, you might be using for this particular area. But when
Hmm.
you use both of them,
Hmm.
good things happen, it sounds like.
Yeah, good
Okay.
things have a tendency of happening. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. And
And there is
why?
a connection. Okay, okay, I'll let you finish.
Actually, uh, I'll keep that. I'll keep it on deck. I wanna know what you were saying.
Yeah, okay. And for me, what connects them, there's a theory by Otto Scharmer called theory of you, where simply, and this is something that actually we kind of do every day. We do in our work, we do in our thinking, we just have never codify it, which is when we don't know the way forward, we kind of, rather than just going by our memory and downloading what we know, we kind of just don't do that and observe and see what reality is telling us, and then from within, some type of emergent solution comes up, and it can come up. You go to bed thinking about a problem, and you wake up with a new perspective. That is kind of like called the theory of you. This letting go to let come, and investigated various people from various fields, and they all had this creative quality, from scientists to insurance salesmen, about this observing, sensing from reality, letting go and then letting come and then crystallizing and then prototyping and then manifesting into the world. So I find that the mind inquiry is this space between letting go and letting come, that it really gets to that space, while a critical inquiry is about navigating this external world of the prototype, of the atom, of the science. And scientists go through this, letting go and letting come, um feedback, in their natural work. They just never codified it, and I wanted to
Hmm.
codify it. So anyway, I don't know if I want to share that, or I could share it. I do have a picture that kind of expresses that, if you want me to share that. Or if not, no problem.
Sure. I mean, you feel free to drop it in the chat.
Okay,
I
cool.
won't be able to really get it on YouTube, at
Gotcha.
least not quickly. But
Yeah,
yeah.
gotcha.
Okay. Okay. We got Western philosophy. We got Eastern philosophy. Not a
Mhm.
mashing of it, using them separate. Scientists use letting go and letting come, and that sounds like that's more of a. I think I've heard it before. I think I've heard it quite a bit. So it's kind of like, don't think about it, let it go for the time being. The
Mhm.
ideas, the thoughts, the inspiration will come to you. Is that kind of what you
Mhm.
mean? Okay,
Yes,
terrific.
yes, and yes, yes, and there's definitely an inherent chaotic element to it. Chaos, ordering, self-organizing aspect to our reality, where solutions bubble up. And then I want to be kind of clear about that, because it's not about, there's something bestowing the solution. It's so that, the reality has a tendency of being very creative and bubbling up solutions for you to pluck and choose, or test to see if this does work in reality well. So yes,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead. So I just wanted to be clear, a little bit clear on that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that this is a natural phenomena and not a supernatural phenomena.
Exactly.
Okay,
Very much so.
gotcha.
Very much so.
Okay. Why are these concepts, these ideas important to you?
Yeah. I remember, there's something that kind of really galvanized me to really go through, to really investigate this. I remember watching a documentary, um by Mahoney, Michael Mahoney, I think it's he's a science director, I guess you could say. He creates science documentaries, and he created a documentary called "The Mathematics of Chaos," and it really um explored well the the age in which we're in which we were so happy about, the Newtonian dream, and science will be the answer for everything, and everything will be computational, and we can break things down mathematically, and if we know the cause and effect of certain things, that we can predict, control our world completely. And then these new theorists come in, talking about butterfly effect and tipping points, and how reality has as much of a chaotic element within it, and yet there is a hidden order inside of this chaos that is unpredictable, hard to discern. So
Hmm.
um, and I was telling another person, uh, from the documentary that I was watching, Kurt Gödel kept coming up again and again about um his the proof that he found in mathematics, arithmetic logic, is that logical systems are inherently incomplete, and that for him, um, there are some problems you can go from A to B to C, and they're very logically and sequentially. You can like go through it, and there are other problems you go from A to B and you're stuck. And he talks about mathematical intuition, which unfortunately, as a logician, as a mathematician, he can't prove rationally. He just knows that
Hmm.
you go within and you kind of intuit the answer that allows you to go from B to C. and this space, this black box space, um, is hard to describe. It's hard to empirically um, describe, even rationally describe. It seems it's like a creative, intuitive space. And so I find his proof to be kind of evidence that there is this space that we use all the time. And I just wanted to codify it, uh,
Okay.
um, how we really navigate reality, and how science can be more complete. And that's kind of an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And more, go ahead.
Why is it important that we? You said like you want to codify this in like as a science with science. I maybe that's not the same term you use. I think you know what I mean. And then and you
Mhm.
said like what was you said like this is how we really navigate our lives, like the real way we navigate our lives.
Well,
I guess
um, well, at least this is definitely how scientists really navigate science.
okay.
But also people who are scientifically minded, um, who want to, employ, you know, uh, observation and testing and evaluating those results and then sharing them. That's kind of like a wise thing to do when trying to navigate our lives. It's just that there is this idea of, as I would call this, foundational strategy of predictive control, which is why scientific theory is so powerful, because it can predict and control. And when we don't have that side, we feel like, um, that we feel like, well, there's no other way to navigate our reality wisely. I'm getting the
Hmm.
sense, and I would, and I got the sense from the documentary that, moving away from this Newtonian dream to this chaotic, you know, uh, way of navigating reality through probability and so forth and so on. Since we don't have the Newtonian dream, everything is like everything's up in the air or everything's gray. And I'm like, no, no, no. There is another pedal that you can use, which is this sense and respond. Since you can't move, since you don't know the way forward, since you can't predict your way forward, you have to sense and see how chaotic reality, what solutions will emerge that you can choose and then navigate, which is what we do, which is what we really, really do. It's not something which I'm like creating off the top of my head. I think we really do it already. We just haven't, like I said, codified it.
Gotcha. Okay, it's something like we do, but we haven't really documented or think about it. It's just kind of a way we react. Okay,
Exactly.
gotcha.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
when you say Newtonian dream, you mean
Newtonian. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Newtonian, Newtonian. You mean Western
Newtonian.
Enlightenment? You mean like critical thinking stuff like that? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, when I say the Newtonian dream, well, I'm going
Mm-hmm.
back to Newton's mechanistic universe. The Laplace view that, the universe is mechanistic, and that was dreamed of by scientists, that yes, it is mechanistic, which means we can computate it, we can um control for it, uh but we're finding through later research, like for example with Lorenz and the butterfly effect, and various studies that talks about this. That down now we're talking about nonlinear dynamics and chaos science, and how reality has that fundamental aspect to it. It will say, in fact, that order and chaos are just two labels of the same potentiality. That they're both the they're it's almost like a yin and yang relationship. They're both interrelated,
Hmm.
and that the labels really don't matter too much. That they're, so we're moving from the Newtonian dream, as I would say, the Newtonian dream of mechanistic universe, to this new to this new way of kind of navigating or imagining reality chaotically, is where we are now.
What are the consequences of living your life in the Newtonian dream
Hmm.
with that mindset? What are the consequences? What bad things happen?
Oh, yeah. One thing that comes to mind is the stock market crash, where a lot of
Mhm.
not I'm sorry, not the housing market crash, 2008, where mathematical models was applied to economic theories, believing that we can just computate and predict how the economic system would go, not realizing that actually a part of this economic system is human beings,
Mm.
and how they are this unpredictable element within the economic system. Um, and it's so interesting that people believe kind of internally, or assume that the economic system has a homeostasis, that the free market hand will balance everything out. That harkens back to this idea of a system being computational, and being able to be predicted and controlled for,
Mm.
um, and that to our lament, um, caused one of the reasons caused such faith in the system when it took us over the cliff.
Uh, if I'm gonna create a really wild hypothetical for you, so bear
Hmm.
with me while I create this,
Hmm.
while I
Hmm.
build this hypothetical. So let's say we have let's go back to 2008, right before the housing market crash, and
Hmm.
we have the existing model, which was
Hmm.
very incomplete, right? It didn't account for human
Hmm.
beings, right? And I think human beings probably pretty hard to predict because I mean, I'm pretty hard to predict. I'm all over the place, right? But so we got our existing model, but let's enter an alternate universe.
Hmm.
Let's say there was a model that accounted for human beings in every little tiny data point possible, and what could predict exactly what humans were going to do. Uh, could it have predicted what was going to happen if it had all of that data?
In that universe,
Hmm.
if it had that possibility, yeah, sure. It most
Oh,
likely it could. It'll be interesting to see. It must be a fundamentally not fundamental, yeah, fundamentally different universe, than how ours operate. But yeah, if that was the case,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay. Even if I'm gonna change the hypothetical slightly. It's our universe. It operates exactly the same. There's just
Hmm.
like unlimited amounts of data on there.
Hmm.
Um, a bazillion of data points.
Hmm.
And then a supercomputer to crunch all these numbers, computing power is pretty much unlimited. Can
Hmm.
it make that prediction?
Well, that's the interesting thing. We have a computer system, with, for example, we try to do it with weather patterns, for example.
Yeah.
And we are horrible at forecasting because there are too many variables. The issue is that there's too many variables,
Hmm.
that you have to account for. That one little bump in a variable, at a particular point, can skew the entire system in a different direction. So
Hmm.
even if you have, all this great computing power, even with something a very simple formula. There's a formula, z squared feedback system, z squared plus c, which creates the Mandelbrot set, they call it. Just even a very simple formula with a feedback loop, and that's the key point. A coupling feedback loop will move the system in unpredictable ways. So it doesn't even matter how powerful the computer system is.
Mm,
It's hard for it to predict where a system will go, in what direction, because there are too many variables to consider.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
I think I understand. Let's back up a moment to
yeah.
um said there's no other way to navigate reality wisely. What's so I think you were talking about kind of like Eastern Enlightenment to some degree, some form of that, and
Mhm.
how we can't just use critical thinking and like, observations about reality to solely navigate our lives. That's kind of what you meant. That was my understanding. Is that what you meant?
Uh, and it's good to clarify because actually, like I said, the paper I wrote kind of explores this. Uh, when it when it comes to being able to observe one's biases and prejudices, uh, you need it seems like you need a different lever than rational thought, rational thinking. And it's a deeply held kind of worldview or a prejudice or a bias. It's something that you need to practice with. It's not something that, just don't be biased. It's not that simple.
Right. Yeah.
You gotta okay, yeah. So that's what I mean by this other mind inquiry is very helpful in exploring one's you cling to one's views, your own views, clinging to views that you or assumptions that you may feel that you take for granted. Slowing the
Mm.
mind down to really dwell into non non-dwelling and viewpoints and how that feels is is uh is a good practice to do, especially for scientists, but for anybody.
Okay. Yeah. Um. Hmm. I had a question that I was going to ask you, and it just slipped my mind. I should have wrote it down. Um. Oh yeah. So with regards to our biases
Hmm.
and getting beyond them, seeing them, so we can get rid of them, because I assume we'd want to get rid of them. I think that'd be a
Well,
honorable goal. Is it?
okay. Hmm.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
what's that process look like?
Yeah. It's a good question. Um, I feel that's where, for example, meditation and mindfulness come into play. It's definitely a three-part kind of process where there is a part where you meditate and cultivate mindfulness in your life so that you kind of slow down your assumptions as you're navigating through life, um, and various stimuli that you automatically react to. You're kind of developing a non-reactivity to. So, cultivating a mindfulness meditative practice is one step of it, one step to do it, and and then there are teachings that I like, but not just Buddhist teachings, but there are very teachings from David Hume and skepticism, skeptical philosophy, which kind of can
Mm.
complement
Hmm.
it, but you know one cultivates this idea of equanimity, of dwelling in non-clinging of views. That's something that's like a practice that you do, that you uh kind of try to navigate. Like, you know, you're with your family and you're a father, and you're playing the role of a father, but you're not, like, there's no father identity, if you know what I'm saying. There's no core father self, because with your friends you're a buddy, with your family you're a father, with if you're a teacher you're a professor with your students, um and to hold these roles with a loose hand, not a tight hand, um it becomes a contemplation. Who am I outside of these roles? What am I outside of these roles? Becomes a contemplative practice, which complements the meditative practice. And then uh fostering a life that is um that is skillful, that helps you to promote equanimity. So I can imagine, for example, you can imagine that being a working in a slaughterhouse really creates a lot of biological or maybe psychological trauma that kind of robs you from being centered and meditative. So you have to choose what kind of work am I going to do that complements this kind of enlightened lifestyle. Um, so all these things come together as far as how to navigate a world that is open, cultivating equanimity, not clinging to views. What does it
Mhm.
mean to dwell in a space of you know uh, non-identity? Becomes a practice that you do. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if I rambled too much.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I think I agree with you, but I'm not sure. I think I might need a dot connected or two.
Hmm.
So we were talking about biases and ways
Hmm.
to at least explore those, see if we have a bias or not.
Hmm.
You talked about meditation, mindfulness, not dwelling. Talked about
Hmm.
identity. I think exploring who you are outside of your identities.
Hmm.
And you connect those concepts, those ideas, and how that relates to a bias?
Yes. Um, for example, here's the perfect example. The example that always comes up for me. Um, Going back to our conversation about Newtonian mechanics, there are a lot of people who, a lot of scientists who really like the Newtonian dream, even though the evidence that started to come really grinded against that. So, I mean, we're talking about, there's a philosopher, Herbert, philosopher of science at the time, which is a big name. He didn't like, atoms, for example. Even though here's evidence that atoms, exist. So his he cling to the idea or cling to the view um that you know these even though the evidence showed them that showed him and others that you had to change your framework about how reality works from this mechanistic to this chaotic reality. They didn't want to go in that direction, and this happens many times in science where even though the evidence is presented, they because it grinds against a worldview or an assumption that they hold dearly, uh that needs to be that halts the scientific progress. And so this practice, dealing with bias and being able to, even though you have a theory that you like and you're biased towards, you cultivate a space of holding the bias, or holding, so I should say, the theory with an open hand, so that you're biased towards it, and you have a willingness to let go if evidence comes up to present itself to make you change your um your idea, or your view about the theory which you hold dearly, but you must discard because of new evidence. The discarding of a theory because of new evidence, especially if you have such an emotional investment in it, that emotional investment uh is causes can cause suffering for people. And it's not just theory, it could be your own worldview ideology. So this idea of um you know seeing your constantly reviewing what biases or assumptions you have, and cultivating a critical inquiry to them, as well as a way to hold space for them, helps you to navigate them well. Not to say that you're able to see outside of a worldview, outside of a paradigm. I'm not saying that we're not trying to get to an omniscient view. It's just that when these biases come up, um, and they come up because they really bump against your comfortability. There's a disturbance that occurs. Um, it becomes a practice of dwelling in disturbance well, when it comes to the biases that you hold, and you want to re investigate and consider. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I What I wrote down, but
Hmm.
I got like one. I got 3 pages of notes so far that I've been taking. And what I wrote down when you were speaking just now was emotional investment. So I think what you were saying was if you're meditate, mindful, try to let go of some of these identities that you have,
Mm.
that you'll have less of an emotional investment in a potential uh, thing that you think is true. And
Yeah, yeah,
if
yes,
you,
yeah,
that
and
emotional investment is that bias. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, that's correct. And there's nothing wrong with a role or an identity. I mean, they're very useful. Just like
Hmm.
a map. Go. The difference between you want to know. How can I say? Here I am in New York. I want to know where Philadelphia is. Philadelphia South. Even though I know that's a construction on a globe,
Right.
there is no north or south. But conventionally, it's helpful to know that if I want to visit my mother. So I just want to, it's not about, the poo pooing of identity. It's about not being so rigidly fixed or so uh, grasping one's identity as oneself is what I'm navigating. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, like seeing past it, like recognizing that it's there, but
Yes,
seeing past it when you need to.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Okay.
I wish I,
Uh,
I did upload my picture, but I can't. For some reason, it doesn't. I can't uh when I hit enter, it doesn't go into the chat. It's weird.
oh, that I don't know. Other people
But
can
anyway,
post images. I've seen other people posting images, so I
yeah.
don't know. Weird.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, maybe it's probably on my side. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, where do we go from here? Where do you want to go with this conversation?
Yeah. So, well, there's one. Here's the interesting. Here's the foundational one. Well, one of the foundational questions or inquiries for me is we live in a country. I mean, I've heard of especially in America, like 15% of the world is like, not the world, sorry, of our country, America, is atheist. And I'm offering a a um a way of life that is non-theistic, and I'm curious how people may receive that. How that could be an alternative if they desire, well, if they wished to explore a life that is non-theistic and yet ethical and moral. That doesn't have to be religious and steeped in the supernatural,
Hmm.
but yet can be very fulfilling as well. So I'm just curious if you feel that this is a something which would be attractive to a person who is non-theistic, atheist um,
I think it could be.
view.
I think it's obviously very dependent on the particular individual.
Hmm.
I don't think this 15%, I don't think all of them would or all of them wouldn't.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I could say even how many. Um,
Hmm.
I- I'm I'm wondering on the importance, like this a way of life that you
Hmm.
described.
Hmm.
What value would it bring a person to join you in this way of life?
Hmm. Well, if I were to phrase it this way, I mean, on the one hand, you know, when you the, in the book that I explore, half the book is exploring critical thinking, and navigating the world employing evidence.
Hmm.
I think that is a valuable, it's a valuable contribution. I think it's something which is what's offered, the Age of Enlightenment, Western Age of Enlightenment already offers. So I think that's valuable in and of itself. But this other aspect, of minimalizing one's suffering in life, and that's kind of like the key point, um, is an important way when it comes to, why do I feel unease or dissatisfaction in life, and to search for that in clothes or cars or sensory delights, and to say, well, and for the trajectory to minimalize that, to say, this stuff can come from within. I think it's a valuable turn, a valuable momentum, um, to begin to embark on, especially in this time of social media and clicks and baits and things of that nature. And comparing yourself to airbrushed images that's online, and you know finding an inadequacy because you don't measure up to what you
Yeah.
find online. To have more, not only critical inquiry about that, but also mind inquiry about that as well. Kind of alleviates one's suffering in that regard. Yeah,
Okay. Can you
yeah,
tell me a little bit about this minimizing of one's suffering? What strategies or what techniques are would you recommend? Would you say are is a part of this way of life?
yeah. I mean, this goes. I mean, this right here. That's straight out of Gautama or Buddha 101. There's something called the poison arrow sutta, that he talks about, when when it comes to how to address one's suffering, based on runaway craving, um, rather than getting into all these high philosophical uh, positions or causes. Before we you can engage this enlightened lifestyle, I need to know that or the other. He's very focused on, no, let's deal with the problem that's at hand. Um, so I don't know. I don't want to make sure I'm answering your question. Am I answering your question? Well, what's your what particular question in particular? I want to make
My
sure I'm answering
question
it.
my question was, so minimizing one's suffering, how do we do that? How do you do that?
Ah, okay. Yeah. I find that, like, when I walk through life, there's a lot of stimuli that before would ensnare me and cause me to go into a spiral, uh, of reactive, like, just grasping. I'm catching it sooner than later, more and more. I'm just not just saying I'm perfect. Okay, I'm definitely not perfect. It's just that I've noticed that in my own life, I've noticed that I would fall. I would be. I would catch runaway craving sooner than later. You know, uh, for example, with walking down the street with a beautiful woman without any practices. The woman would pass, but my mind will still spiral like, oh, I wonder what she is. I wonder what she. Even though I have a girlfriend, I mean, right now, also now I have a wife, and I want to live a virtuous life. Uh, you know, but yet, being tugged by, all this, various craving, like sexual craving. Having this practice helps me to notice this runaway mind, and to employ other practices. um sitting with the feeling of craving itself, and yet not being attached to it, but just feeling the energy of it. I see how it can easily dissipate over, in the trajectory into the future. But if I keep on stimulating it, then it keeps on becoming bigger. If you know what I mean, it's almost like you're poking a wound, and the wound becomes more and more infested. rather than just leaving the wound alone and allowing it to heal. Likewise, this idea of, sitting with the uncomfortable craving, or the tension, and then seeing it dissipate over time, can become a sense of victory, inner victory for yourself, that you're able to do that. And I'm touching those moments more and more, um in that way.
Okay. I think this is helping you minimize your suffering because you are focusing on what really matters or what is important to you rather than what is reactive or uh, um, happens to be in front of you at the moment.
Yes, yes. And there could be other practices that can help with, um because it's not just about just being mindful and meditative, but
Hmm.
there are other practices that you want to cultivate positive states of mind. That there's even like meta meditation, loving kindness meditation, where you can, cultivate, loving kindness for yourself and others, as a way to foster a sense of centeredness and equanimity, especially when it's someone that you say like you don't like, and so you can approach that person more, with more equanimity, m- with more equanimity, and approach them with reason, not ensnared by hatred. So there are practices like compassion meditation, loving kindness meditation, and there's probably other practices as well that you can employ to cultivate positive states of mind, but also, allow negative states of mind to diminish. It's definitely a twofer. That's one of the things that I think is missed in the kind of mind inquiry practice. That there are practices that you can cultivate to be a more loving person, a more compassionate person. So that, which is
Interesting.
navigating. Mhm.
I've heard of kind of two separate trains of thought, I guess you could say, on kind of this matter of diminishing uh, negative thoughts, right? And
Mhm.
one of them is like you feel it, you work through it, you feel the negative thoughts, you think about it, you feel it, and you go through the process of feeling that feeling. And then
Mhm.
the other train of thought is that you let go of it immediately and try to not feel this feeling, not even go there. Are you in
Mhm.
one of those camps or the other?
Um, it sounds like the first camp, uh, because I mean it's as you can imagine, what you want and what your mind wants can be two different things, and that's one of the interesting things
Mhm.
that, and you find, well, I find, and I've heard other masters, well, teachers talk about, that's the Buddha's awakening, is that here I am with an intention, but then there's this mind that I thought was me, but actually it's its own entity, which now I want to train, where now I want to sculpt, and it's been called, Mara, the mind of attraction or repulsion, um, and the delusion that I am that mind. That it becomes an interesting practice of not being so connected or identified with that mind, but now you can begin to direct that mind. You can begin to train that mind. So yes, I feel like the first one you talked about, there is a state of craving and desire, but then if you kind of back away, but there's still that energy that wants you to have it, so you kind of allow it to, allow it to settle and recede. Yes, I can. I've felt that in my own practice. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
And yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having a little help. That's why I say, let's say for example, you're with someone that is difficult to be with, and you can, use it as a meditation practice of seeing how those angry feelings come up, and you're sitting with it and you're feeling that, and by the virtue of the first, they say called the first noble truth, that things are impermanent, that it will not stay the same. It may feel like it will, but it will dissipate. So that's a long, and that's a process you can do. But you also have other tools in the toolbox, like loving kindness meditation, and employing that rather than seeing them as an enemy, seeing them as a family member. That just you may have a difference of opinion, or and it doesn't negate the negative feelings, but it reframes of who they are in relation to you, which makes it helpful. So yeah, there's different. That's my thing, and there's a whole. They call it the 30. There's like 30 7. It's called it's like the overview of the Dharma. It's like 37 practices, 37 tools in the toolbox you can use. Mindfulness and meditation is one. There's
Hmm.
various tools in the toolbox you can use. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But now
All
if
right.
I may say, this is my final addition. Um, but here's the thing, which I find, and I talk with people who are, people practice the Dharma and so forth. When when it comes to, so that's its area of expertise. That's its area of interest, is the mind and how it navigates reality. But when it comes to, I mean, there are stories about um Buddhists who back in the day who felt that, the universe was flat. Mounts,
Hmm.
there was a single mountain that was in the middle of the entire universe, and gods were at the top, and there were, there were different directions. So when it comes to uh when it comes to scientifically or empirically knowing what reality is, that is not its area of interest. I feel
Okay.
that's not the Buddhist area of interest.
Gotcha. So
Um,
they're kind of two separate things.
yeah,
One has one particular utility, the other has another particular utility. Gotcha.
yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on?
No, that's the only thing that comes to mind is I'm very interested in how we can apply this to politics, how we can apply this to various aspects of our life.
Hmm.
Um, you know, for example, like I was just talking with somebody about abortion, and how, from this enlightened, can call it enlightened lifestyle. Um, if you're approaching it from a critical inquiry and mind inquiry, the critical inquiry is really the scientific inquiry. What does the science say? You know, about the fertilization of the egg, and how it, sometimes through natural menstruation flushes out of the body.
Mm-hmm.
If religious people say that, life occurs at conception, but then nature has a tendency of having that flush out, then it seems like God is doesn't value life that much. If the natural process has um causes the egg to flush out and not attach naturally
Hmm.
sometimes. And so that's the critical inquiry aspect of it. Exploring life as a evidence, through an evidence exploring life through an evidence-based perspective. And then, of course, there's the mind inquiry of, not being attached to a label, because some people, especially those who are religious, call them murderers and things of that nature. And well, so how am I going to respond to that? Um, how am I going to respond well to that in the face of, scientific evidence? So,
It's interesting what you brought up. I'm wondering, with regards to this abortion example.
mhm,
So you mentioned evidence and observations about reality. What sometimes can occur with a fertilized egg, the menstrual
mhm.
cycle can sometimes wash it out. How does these observations inform our political stance? What we think should be legal regarding abortion? What is the connection there between these observations about reality and what we advocate for, or in politics and in the legal system?
Well, I tell you, that is something that, um, I mean, fundamentally, you know, you can see the foundation of, this, because, like I said, there's this Western Eastern Enlightenment, because I can imagine Buddha himself would not have really an opinion about this. Is outside of his purview.
Hmm.
I can imagine, um, except that back to the first noble truth, things that you want, the eight winds of life. There is gain and loss. There's pleasure and pain. There's fame and blame, and then there's suffering and happiness. That these are natural winds of life, gain and loss, for example. So, and not and for that to be kind of the space where you cultivate equanimity, and where meditation mindfulness comes in handy for that. So that's on the mind inquiry side. And on the, of course, the critical inquiry side, we're there's definitely a root of humanism that comes into play, and the woman and her um autonomy of being a human being, and navigating life uh on her terms, through her terms. uh I feel that yeah, it's something, that is a part of the human ideal, I guess you could say. I don't know how to
Okay.
express that well, but yeah. But the thing is that, and I think for me, it's not necessarily what is the exact answer, but coming to that answer in a space that is reasonable and compassionate is what the light and lifestyle is about. Not necessarily this is right or this is wrong, but for us to navigate together in a reasonable, compassionate fashion towards what we can collectively navigate as right and wrong collectively. I think that's more of what the practice helps to do, to be a foundation for
I like that. I think that's a nice plan.
that.
How do Where does that come from? Like the the compassion. Like, is there a stemming point that comes from?
Yeah, yeah. It's it's a very interesting it's a very interesting thing when you, well, when you start moving away from um a theistic kind of understanding of, God will help us, and that,
Hmm.
in this kind of lifestyle, there is no reliance on that we are in this together in a universe that is indifferent to how we feel, then what we have is each other. And I think
Okay.
that is where, for example, Gautama himself, why he created the Sangha, because he knows that this can be a difficult road to travel. So to travel together in a community, the Sangha means community, a practice community. It's helpful to do that.
Okay.
So that's on the one side. And of course, I can tell you on the other side, of primate, primate behavior. Um, Compassion seems to be like a social aspect, almost evolutionary adaptation that, if done, creates a cohesive community. So it's favored to be compassionate because it creates more harmony than to be, I'm going to kill my neighbor, which causes disharmony and breaks up the community, especially when we are genetically wired to be social animals. So from those branches, compassion kind of like springs,
I'd like
I
to do
feel.
a little thought experiment with you.
Mm,
It's regarding value prioritization.
mm,
I'd like to talk to you about which values a person who is like pro-abortion legalization versus someone who is anti-abortion legalization.
mm.
We could probably use simpler terms if we can say pro pro-life and pro pro rights maybe to make it clear. Uh, but for these two different groups of people who advocate for opposing ideas,
Mhm.
do you think that it's a matter of different value prioritization, or do you think it's something else?
Between those who value pro-abortion versus those who don't, different values
Pro-abortion
or
versus anti-abortion? Yes.
um I can because it's based on how the people value, like Judeo-Christians, especially Judeo-Christian perspective, they value the life of the child versus the woman,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But I always find it to be it's too black and white, and I think that's one of the
Mm.
big issues about the binary choice about that, because in certain circumstances you have to choose one or the other. Um, and so yeah, it's hard to make an evaluation, a binary evaluation, because it's they're definitely based on the context that we're talking about.
Sure.
A woman finds out, the baby is stillborn, uh, or the baby will be severely deformed. Um, but yet, the state says, you still have to carry the term because we don't believe in abortion. That seems to be unreasonable. But yet,
Uh-huh.
after birth abortion, as I heard, also feels very unreasonable. But so it's definitely a case by case basis. But to have a law to dictate um what should be a woman should do uh on all cases, I think is on either side is problematic.
If there was an atheist who was pro-life or anti-abortion, whatever terms we want to use, what do you think would be their like what do you think would be their top value in coming to that conclusion?
Tell you the truth, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm not, and what I mean by that is, even if you were to phrase it the other way, an atheist who was, pro-choice, and
Yeah.
how they come to that conclusion, I still, um, I don't know, I still wouldn't, because everybody has their way of navigating to that themselves about why they feel the way they feel.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Would it be okay if I shared my thoughts on that?
sure.
Okay. I think, kind of setting aside religious beliefs for the moment,
Hmm.
someone who was pro-choice, I think
Hmm.
they're probably their top priority, uh, given situation, would probably be prioritizing human life. I think that they also, or I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh, what was I? Who was I going first? I was saying pro pro light
You said
pro.
you saying yourself in particular.
No, no, no. Let me start over. We're gonna just start over with that little bit.
Okay.
Okay, someone who's pro-choice, so who wants to allow abortions.
Hmm.
This person, their top priority would probably be autonomy. That would probably be one of their top priorities. They would want to be in control of their body.
Mhm.
And I think they probably also would have the a value of, I think all people have want to prioritize human well-being, human life. I think they still do have that value, even though they might value autonomy on top of that. Uh, and then if you compare that to someone who is would be considered, at least the term pro-life, so anti-abortion, I think they would value uh, human life, prior or valuing human life, protecting human life, probably at their top one. And then somewhere down the line, they would probably have a value of autonomy, but it would be below that other one of protecting human life.
Mm.
You think that sounds about right, or what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's I can see that being a person's position. One pro-choice valuing autonomy versus person pro-life valuing the autonomy of the child. Um, yeah, I could see that being a position that either camp may hold. Mhm.
And I think both of those positions, that person A and person B could agree on all the facts, on all the observations about reality,
Mhm.
all the critical thinking bits, and still come to opposite conclusions about
Mhm.
reality. So I
Right.
think talking about those values and why they're important to us,
Mhm.
I think that's how we figure out the solution. What do you think?
Yeah. That's that. It's an interesting question because I think that is and correct me if I'm wrong or clarify my understanding of this, but um I don't know. Are you in America right now? I'm just
Yes.
curious.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So I feel like we're in a values war in a sense. In America, that's how I phrase it. About what do we value as Americans? Do we value secular pluralism, where all points of view are um, are brought together to move this country forward, or you know are we valuing one particular set of principles in spite of others and making that the central um, definition of what America is. Uh, and I must admit that this is where, oh, I want to be careful in saying this, but this is where I feel that the move towards a better way of relating to each other outside of a faith-based religion maybe is the path forward, because I don't see another path. I mean, in the way in which that all faiths are brought together are an inclusive house, which is what I value, or favoring one over all others, which I don't value.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, the, that is where we are, and that's how we need to decide as a movement, as an American movement, um, how we're going to proceed together in that way. And
Hmm.
that's a difficult answer to difficult. You can imagine where I stand, but
Yeah. I what I have seen, what I've observed is that we, as Americans, we don't really talk about why certain values are important to us, but rather we talk about who's right, who's wrong.
yes.
Here's a fact, here's another fact.
Hmm.
uh, And I don't think we ever really get down to what's really important in our conversations, typically.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think a lot of times we stay on the surface and we Well, here's this fact. Well, here's this fact. We never talk about how those facts relate to what we should do, if
Mm,
they relate to what we should do.
mm,
I'd like to have more conversations like that. I'd like to talk about if these things that we observe relate to what we should do, how they relate to what we should do,
mm,
and more, and just as importantly, where are certain values should be on our priority list. Which one is number one? Which one's number two? Which one's number 10? Right?
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, 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 indeed, indeed. And it's, you know, it's difficult when um there's this view that, the reason why my values is above your values because God gave them to me. So
Yeah.
so how do you even navigate that? Unlike mine, unlike, say like on my side where, and this is a stark fundamental difference, especially when it comes to ethics, morality, where you know God giving you these values, God giving you what is right and wrong, versus on my side, especially on the mind inquiry side, where what is deemed right and wrong is how you consider what may occur that is both beneficial and harmful as you're doing it, seeing if it's beneficial and harmful, and then seeing the long-term consequences of what occurs and seeing if it's beneficial and harmful. In those three stages, both past, present, well, before it occurs, as you're doing it, and in the future, and then deeming from that, yeah, that was skillful to do, or that was unskillful to do. That's very different than a value system which says this is what is good and this is what is not good. That's so. And my question to you, Pierce, is: do you feel that we can or should move towards that type of way of navigating reality ethically, and that kind of ground up versus the top down? Or maybe we don't have to choose. Or maybe we uh don't have to, use one and disregard the other. I mean, because I find a lot of value in various religions, in various wisdom teachings. I suppose that the difference is that I don't consider the wisdom teaching in and of itself inerrant.
Mm. Hmm.
There was varies from Norse mythology to Greek mythology to Christian, Judeo-Christian teachings to Quranic teachings. They all have wisdoms within it, but I don't see them as unerrant, and I think that becomes problematic, and maybe the move we need to go and we can go towards. But here's something that also comes to mind for me. That why I even started this one to have this conversation with you, which is that the that there is a tradition that even predates Christianity, predates Islam, which has investigated morality in a very deep, and we talked about it in a very deep way. Um, and that seems like we can move in that direction, versus the divine command and you do space. So what do you think? And that's another reason why I wanted to explore this enlightened lifestyle, that we can move in this direction versus before, where it's like the reason why we should, there's rational empirical reasons why this is good and this is bad, which has not really caught on. It seems very, we call it cultural relativistic. Another culture might believe something is right and this is wrong, and this culture might believe this is right and this is wrong. How can you? It becomes a move towards amorality, a cultural relativism, by doing it that way, which has been a critique of people who are religious, who find that secular humanists seems to slip into a cultural relativism. What's your view
Yeah.
on that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think I'd rather kind of go from the bottom up rather than the top bottom,
Mm,
right? I think I'd like to evaluate each item individually and see what it's about on its own merit. Uh, Not really like I'd like to try to investigate each one separately. Let's figure this out. Let's figure this out. Let's figure this out. Let's try to figure it out the best way that we can. Try to figure out a way that will meet everybody's needs. Find a solution that will meet everybody's needs. That is, gonna work for the for do the best good for the most amount of people. I suppose you could say,
mhm,
and evaluate that on our own terms rather than appealing to something else. That's what I would prefer. Each person is obviously going to make up their own mind. That's the way I'd like to go though.
mm, interesting. Well, that's it for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I guess
And
what I
I don't know if
can
people yeah, I thought maybe people had questions or I don't know, or if we even do this here.
yeah, we could do that. We could do
Oh,
question
okay.
time. That'd be cool. Yeah, I'm still streaming, guys, just so you're aware. So if you do come up on stage, people will be able to see and or hear you. But if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I'll bring you up on stage. If anybody wants to do that. Otherwise, you can type a question in the chat. That'd be perfectly fine too. I see nobody typing. I see nobody raising their hand. So I guess we got no
Okay.
takers.
That's cool. That's
Oh,
cool.
somebody's typing. Hey, look at that. See what they're saying. Oh, everybody's typing now. Is it like delayed? Maybe it's delayed. I don't know. No, they should be able to hear us instantaneously. Have you read the Pali Canon yourself?
And I have read many parts of it, many parts. Yeah. Um, yes, the answer is yes. hmm And some of it, there's some of it that's has a lot of supernatural elements to it. Um, and even Gautam himself, he's like, all the supernatural miracle stuff that don't worry about that. It's very interesting for a founder to say that, just like, imagine, Jesus, don't worry about the miracles and stuff, just my teachings is what I've never heard of that before. But anyway, yes, I have read the Pali Canon.
All right. Next question is, how does this fit into compassionate epistemology? That was kind of the plan. I don't know if I did a very good job at keeping that loose structure. So
Mm-hmm,
maybe it didn't. Maybe it didn't. I think towards the
mm-hmm,
end it was more of a CE thing than at the beginning.
mm-hmm,
The value prioritization conversation, I think it is CE. I think.
mm-hmm.
Um, but hey, you know, new thing
If,
for me.
if, but yeah, but now, and I was talking with Dale. You and Dale, you both created this CE thing,
uh,
or
Yeah, we're working on it together. It was originally Dale's idea, but yeah, we got a few different people working on it.
yeah.
I'm one of those people.
I was remember talking with Dale about the this aspect of how it differentiates street epistemology from compassionate epistemology, and he talked about the nonviolent communication
Hmm.
aspect of it, and that was very intriguing to me, because when I began to research about nonviolent communication, I began to see, wow, these various aspects, this observation, um, and then what's the word, feelings, what are your feelings,
Hmm.
what is the needs, and then requests, all of those aspects, all those aspects can have practices plugged in there. For example, the observation aspect, you want to, you know without without being judgmental, you want to state what you're observing rather than automatically, uh, uh, putting forth your opinion about what's happening. That requires a mindful meditation practice to be able to, because reactively you want to maybe speak in a way that's, like just emotional when um uh meditate. It's almost not almost, but a great analogy is, meditation mindfulness practice. It's like, the space between the stimulus and response becomes a little bit wider. Before meditation, it's like really narrow. It's like stimulus response. But when you meditate, and the more you meditate, the more patience you have to cultivate that space, then you could, engage these nonviolent communication aspects more easier. It's more easier
Mhm.
to do it than not doing it. So I find a lot interesting kind of correlation or connection between nonviolent communication and mind inquiry. Yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely
totally.
read the as speech. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can totally see the similarities just in speaking to you just now. Like there's a lot of things that are similar. So
Hmm.
yeah, totally. Mango has a question. So
Hmm.
Ascend, when did you start getting interested in all of this? How has it been valuable in your life?
Oh wow, goodness. Well, here's the first question. When did I start getting interested in all this? Um, I was, how can I say this? I went to elementary school and high school, Catholic elementary school and high school. And well, I'm 50, going on 50 now. So, um, so up until 1999, when I saw the movie The Matrix, that's when I
I
started to go in a different
love
direction.
that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's when I started getting into all this. That's when that was my initial, this is so many Buddhist themes in the Matrix, and it just
It's true.
started me down this path. Yeah. And so that's and then I don't know if people know, I got a master's degree in Buddhism, uh um and was a Buddhist minister for about 4 years. And then I wanted to the denomination that I was a Buddhist minister in was out of Korea, and they were like what we would call a Mahayana sect. They were in the Mahayana realm or large denomination in Buddhism. And I wanted to get to the more earlier aspects, so I left. I disrobed. I wanted to study earlier Buddhism, and that's where I am now. And but when I read books like from Donald Lopez, Buddhism and science, and how there's a lot of supernatural cosmological kind of stances that early Buddhists had that had no scientific backing at all, that we were that I briefly touched on. Then I began to say, you know what, and also, for example, I was just recently doing research on um uh, they call it androcentrism kind of tendency in Theravadan Buddhism, where male monks are given a little higher status than female monks, and it's cultural. But when you go back to the teachings, you don't see Gautama having this like male monks here, female monks there, maybe some scant passages, but but and there is no like division in the teachings, but yet culturally there became division uh, and how they expressed it institutionally. So once again, that is where critical inquiry comes into play to inquire about this, to observe and see what is happening, and to navigate in the modern century, be expressed in a way that is better than before. So that's why I'm really interested in how both can help each other. So anyway, that was long for the first question, but the second question is, how has this been a valuable how has this been valuable in your life? It's Wow, it's been I think we talked about it, right? It's been very valuable
Yeah.
in my life. A lot of uh yeah, a lot. When happy.
Um,
Oh, what's up? You gonna say something?
you no, you froze on my screen. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I was like wondering what was going on. You're all good now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember when I was 8 years old asking what is happiness? And even asking that question at 8 years old, automatically, you could say it's a spiritual question. It's definitely not a question that is about the instant gratification of the here and now, but it's something further. So I can see, this practice, this way of life, uh, and the decisions that I make, and the decision I make about who I marry. This became a very important deciding point. I wanted to, for example, marry a person who practices the Dharma, and for our relationship to be. And she's here now. Her name's C. She's the one with the green icon. That's my wife. And
Nice.
so, yeah, so we practice the Dharma practice, and I found to be a very valuable aspect of getting to know someone and moving away from the superficiality towards something deeper uh, in a relationship when you practice this. So I can attest that it's very valuable in that way, in other ways as well. So
Okay, we got a very long question
wow.
here. Mindful meditation that takes what exactly? I agree we need to teach a form of this in the West.
Hmm,
Okay, that may not have been a question.
yeah.
The question down here, how can we encourage people to take themselves and others into consideration through mindfulness meditation other than leading by example? Are there any
Uh,
other institutions that are, for lack of a better term, recruiting or evangelizing? Are there any techniques that you have learned from your studies in the faiths?
yeah. Other than leading by example, that's a very interesting, lack of a better term, recruiting or evangelizing. Yeah, that's a very interesting. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting question because even Gautama himself didn't evangelize. He didn't evangelize.
Mhm.
People saw what he was doing, and we want to do what you do. He says, "Well, come follow me." But he never was like, I'm gonna go out to the middle of the street and say, "You must practice Buddha." No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Doesn't
Yeah,
doesn't work that
and
way.
I'm not. It doesn't work that way. No. What I think is a better way, and I had this conversation with other people, is creating communities where you invite them. And like a community that I have a community here, Enlightened Lifestyle. I have it on Discord, and that's how it was with others. I was just invited just to sit and practice, and rather than being told, this is the best, this is what you should do. There's none of that energy in it. It's in a refreshingly pedantic way. It's almost like um going to a class
Hmm.
rather than going to a church you're being preached at. It's going to a class, sitting, observing your mind, and tell me what you see when you do that. That's the energy of it, rather than evangelizing. So, and I like that energy, rather than the other evangelizing energy. It doesn't. But for people to get together and practice together, I think it's the best way than recruiting or evangelizing, but offering a space for people to come. But when it says here, are there any techniques that you've learned from your studies in the faiths? Oh yeah. Uh, like for example, from Islam, they pray 5 times a day, right? I think that's a really great way. Like, and what I do, I have a insight meditation timer that goes off. Actually, it doesn't go off just 5 times a day. It goes off every hour. but that stopping throughout the day when you're doing something, when you're just in the momentum of doing something and being and routinely stopping and taking a breath just for a few seconds and then going back. It just helps you to get more uh, get the have the ability to more and more get out of a momentum, to stop rather than just keep on going, keep on reacting, keep on doing, and just you'll find that helpful to do that. So from the Islamic faith, that stopping, they stop and they pray. They do a full complete ritual, but I like their stopping throughout the day practice. So yeah. Um, let's see.
All right.
Any other?
Well, I think we got one more question.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of people who experience a rift between their beliefs and their family. Did that affect you at all?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Me and my mother. My mother's very much a she's a Christian, and she's fundamentalist, and
Mm-hmm.
so she's always, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for your soul. Thanks, mom. Okay, thank you for that. So and my family. I have family. And they're very, and but we're cordial with each other. But you can definitely tell that there's a bit of a little tension, unspoken tension. So yes, it definitely does. Definitely, there definitely is that. But we do talk.
Good.
I'm not disowned.
Good. 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 All right. Any last words before we call tonight?
Just that if anyone's interested in the enlightened lifestyle, I'm on Discord. I see Mango. Mango's a new member there, and if anybody else is interested, just let me know. Shoot me a DM, and I'll. You too, Pierce, if you're interested.
Yeah, sure. I will join.
Okay, great, 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 good, good. All right, that's it. Wonderful.
All right.
All
Let's
right.
end it.